There are two main sources of inspiration which explain why we work the way we do at Enrich. One is the positive focus that we employ, and the other is an experiential approach to the work that we do. Now, if we start with the positive focus, this essentially is based in the idea that you can choose where you place your focus. You can choose to spend your time firefighting and solving problems and identifying problems all the time and going from one problem to solving the next. Or you can choose to focus on the things that you're doing well and the strengths that you have and build your success on that. And you might just find that by building on your strengths and building on your successes, that the problems start to disappear anyway. And it's actually not a new idea. 600 years ago, Erasmus was basically making this exact same point when he wrote, "Give light and the darkness will disappear of itself." But it's important to note that a positive focus doesn't just mean being positive about everything, running around with a big thumbs up and saying, that's great, everything's perfect, we're all doing great. It's important to be honest about how you're doing and how things are. And we're not afraid to be critical also sometimes if that's required, and to give very direct, honest and courageous feedback to some of our customers. And obviously if there are some problems that could represent a critical barrier to success, then maybe they do need to be dealt with. But generally we believe that your greatest potential for growth is by identifying your strengths and building on those to improve performance. Now, over the last 10 or 15 years, this approach has become more and more recognized and is represented in the popularity of approaches like appreciative inquiry and solutions-based coaching and so on. And I think a lot of it for us is summed up under the field of positive psychology and the research that's going on in that area, looking at well-functioning people and what can psychology offer them. And there's a lot of great research being done in that area at the moment. But I do find that this is something that's been quite a theme in a lot of the work that I've done, also in other areas. I remember back in the mid-90s working with young people with extreme behavioral problems, and we used there a technique known as positive affirmation, which essentially focused on ignoring the bad behavior but giving praise and attention to good behavior. So you would build on the times when the young people were behaving well, rather than all the time giving them attention for when they were behaving badly. And even the results that achieved with young people with quite extreme problems were really amazing to see. So I can see this positive focus is something which has been quite a recurrent theme in my working life over the last nearly 20 years now. And then there's the other aspect of the way we work, the experiential approach, which is really about getting hands-on and being practical, learning by doing. And there are a lot of different models that explain how this might work. Kolb's is one of the most famous ones as a possible explanation for why experiential learning works or how it works. Personally, I draw a lot of inspiration from the writings and work of Kurt Hahn, and his motto, "There's more in you than you think," sums up beautifully some of the great experiences we have with customers, where we can see them and sometimes they recognize themselves when they break through one of their own personal psychological barriers and actually achieve something they hadn't even thought possible. And that's a wonderful moment to share with participants when you see them demonstrating themselves to be capable of more than they had realized. And actually this idea isn't new either, the idea of getting hands-on and being practical. Confucius supposedly said something along the lines of, if I hear, I'll forget, if I see, I'll remember, but if I do, then I'll understand. And there are plenty of forms of learning where maybe books and lectures and so on and PowerPoint is appropriate, and that's fine, everything has its place. But when you look at a lot of the sorts of things we deal with in terms of leadership and behavior, the way people interact within teams, the attitudes and values people have, these are all things which is really quite hard to learn from a purely academic approach alone. These are all things where we're getting hands-on and doing it and getting feedback and interacting that can be quite important. So you learn things not just on a cognitive level, but you manage to actually strike also on a behavioral level, and sometimes on an emotional level. And that really sums up why we have the experiential approach. So the experiential approach, the experiential education, and the positive focus together really sum up why we work the way we do in our philosophy at Enrich.